is Charlotte Mason and what in the world does she have to do with homeschooling? Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name's Brittany. I am a homeschooling mama of almost 4, and I am going to talk to you a little bit today about Charlotte Mason. If you've been around the homeschooling world for a little bit, then you will have at least heard of Charlotte Mason. But I have found that there are a lot of misconceptions about who she was and what her philosophy is. So I want to talk a little bit today about what the Charlotte Mason philosophy is and what it isn't, and a little bit about who Charlotte Mason was. So Charlotte Mason was an English educator in the late 1800s. She maintained the philosophy that children are born persons, that we must educate not just the mind, but also the body and the spirit of the child. So she also proposed the idea that children should be given a feast of ideas, that we shouldn't just jam facts into children's heads, that they should be given an abundance of ideas, and that children are naturally curious and that they will pick up on this. They will get that love of learning if we provide the opportunity. So Charlotte Mason believed that she said that education was an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life. So what that means is that the atmosphere would be what the children grow up with, so what their life looks like. So she believed that 1/3 of the child's education is the ideas that the parents hold. So what you are presenting to them on a daily basis as their life, that's 1/3 of their whole education. Because, if you think about it, the way that you're raised, the ideas that your parents present to you, oftentimes it does stick with you for the rest of your life. And so, excuse me, we have to be very aware of that and make sure that we are giving them the correct ideas. And that's also kind of brings in a lot of the things like the mother culture, which I'm going to do a whole separate video on mother culture. But that whole thought of that we as adults should continue to be growing in who we are as people and who we are in the Lord, and that we should never stop learning. So that we present that to our children, and so they think that learning is just a way of life. It's not just something that you do from 6 until 18 and then you don't worry about it. Or obviously some kids go to college, but that's not how it works. That we should just, as people, as in general, we should just continue to learn all the time. So that's the whole idea of that education is an atmosphere. So her second point is that education is a discipline. So this is not talking about discipline as in punishments. This is talking about discipline as in like self-discipline, as in habits. So the second third of the child's education, Charlotte Mason believed, would be brought about through the learning and cultivating of good habits. The thing you have to realize is that as children, as people in general, we are all developing habits every day. When you choose to sit on the couch instead of going to exercise, that's a habit. When you choose to exercise instead of sit on the couch, that's a habit. So as you're teaching your children to pay attention or to be obedient or to give their very best effort, these are habits that will last. If you're careful to build these into your children, they could potentially last their entire lives. And Charlotte Mason would say, I don't know the exact quote, but she would say that a a habit is 10 times stronger than nature, than your given nature. We all have different tendencies. You know, some people are more patient than others. Some people are more giving or loving. And those are our natural tendencies that are within us, just our personality. Charlotte Mason argued that a habit, a properly formed habit, is 10 times stronger than your nature. And so she really emphasizes habit training in her teaching because it really is the foundation of your child's education. So her third point was that education is a life. And that is whenever we're talking about the academics. So think about that though. The academics, Charlotte Mason said, would only be a third of your child's education. That is completely opposite of what we normally do in, say, traditional schooling. So the idea is that you would provide them the living thoughts, not just dry facts, that you would give them these thoughts and they would take them and run with them and grow with them. So the big question is, how do you give your children living thoughts? So this is where the second, well, I don't want to say second, we've been talking for a while now. So this is where another big thing comes in that most people recognize as a trademark of Charlotte Mason, and it's the living books. So a living book would be a book that is written in most of the time in a narrative fashion. It is something that is captivating and interesting. It's not something that's boring. So it's not like a textbook where you're just given facts. So say you wanted to study, good example. So say you wanted to study World War II, the Holocaust. And so instead of giving your child a textbook to read, you would give them The Hiding Place. So that tells the story of Corrie ten Boom and her experience within the Holocaust. You would give them books like that are written in a way that is interesting, that is going to give them the information in a way that catches their attention. The whole goal is to have an emotional response to the literature. When you have an emotional response, it triggers a reaction in your brain and you actually hold on to the facts. Think about the last time you remember something from, say, a history lesson. It probably was not because the teacher stood up and presented these facts to you. I'm sure there are some people that worked for, but most people, that is not how they learn. They learned from maybe a series they watched on television or a really good historical fiction book that taught them what it was like to live in that time era. I know most of my historical knowledge comes from historical fiction or from biographies, from things that I had that emotional response and I was connected to the story. So what you do with that with your child is they would read these books, or you would read them aloud, and then you would ask them for a narration. So they would basically tell back what they remembered from the story. Different kids will pick up on different things, and so you don't correct them, you just let them go with it. And whenever we go about the action of verbalizing what we have read, solidifies it in the, whenever we go about the action of verbalizing what we've read, it solidifies it in the brain, and we're actually going to retain that information because we've made a connection with it. Moving away from living books, another thing that Charlotte Mason felt very strongly about is that children need an abundant amount of time outdoors. She actually said that children would thrive with 6 hours outside. Now, she was not a crazy person. She did not expect parents to take their children outside for 6 hours every single day. That would be ideal. However, realistically, it's not going to happen. So the whole goal is just to be outside as much as possible. Children really learn through play so much, and it's really good for them to be outdoors and to to get their creative juices flowing, if you will. So another thing that Charlotte Mason really stressed was the exposure to really great works through different artists and composers. So this would fall into your enrichment studies. She really kind of pushed that we shouldn't just stick to the 3 R's, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, that we really need to push to give our children things of beauty, to appreciate the world, and to love good things. And so she really emphasized poetry and composer studies and artist picture studies, and what else? Obviously nature studies. Nature studies is another big one that, obviously, with feeling so strongly about children being outdoors, nature studies is a big one. I'm going to do a whole nother video on nature studies, on what that looks like, because that's the more involved one. And so she just wanted to really emphasize the things of beauty in the world, and not just the educational aspects. Another thing that Charlotte Mason would emphasize that children would learn to do is handiworks. So what that would be things like knitting or crochet or woodworking, things like that, things that you could do to bless somebody else, that you could use, that you could learn as a skill to help somebody else. It could be given as a gift, or it could be given toward the family. It's something that is beneficial for the child to learn and will help them to grow. It also gives them an excellent thing to do when they're bored and they want something to do. If they know all of these handicrafts, they will have plenty of options on what they can do. There will be no time for boredom. One thing that Charlotte Mason does do a little differently also, along with the way that she would do history and science, I don't know if I really covered it very well. History and science, there would not be a lot of sit-down work as far as worksheets. Worksheets are not a thing in a typical Charlotte Mason home. We instead, again, do the narration. As children age out and they start getting more independent, you would have them do written narration. And so they would just write a few sentences of what they have learned, and you as the instructor would review it and move on from there. And so a similar thing is that for spelling and handwriting, there are no lists and drilling and tests or things like that. What Charlotte Mason would do is, through these really good books that you're reading, she would pick out passages or sentences, or she would pull scripture, and she would have the students study that passage for words they didn't know and learn how to spell them, and then give, for smaller children or younger children, they would do transcription. So they would have the paragraph or the verse or whatever, and they would just write it out. For older children, you would do dictation. And so whenever they were prepared, you would just dictate the paragraph or the verse, and the child would then write it out. And then you would check it for any mistakes and point out the areas that they got wrong, and so that they would learn. And that's that. That's the extent of it. There are not little quizzes or anything like that. One very common misconception, and it's very common, I actually did it myself whenever I first started taking on the Charlotte Mason philosophy. A lot of people believe that Charlotte Mason did not believe in tests, and that's not true. Charlotte Mason actually took an entire week every term, which is 12 weeks. She would take a week every term to give an exam week. And so the students would have these week-long tests. Now, they don't look like normal tests in that the questions are all open-ended, and For smaller children, they would again do a lot of narration if they weren't really efficient in handwriting. For older children, they would do written narration. That she would ask questions over the things that they learned that term, and they would do written narration. They might also recite the poem that they had been working to memorize, or sing the hymn that they had been working to learn, perform their handicraft at the end for a grade. So there are many ways that she would do examinations, but she was definitely not anti-test, which is what I thought too. So we can all be wrong. Another thing that some people are a little leery of, because it is so countercultural to how we do things now, is that Charlotte Mason did not believe that children should start formal schooling until the age of 6. So before that, and actually I have heard 6, I've heard 7, but generally 6 to 7 years old. And sometimes I think it could have been pushed a little bit further, but generally 6 to 7 years old is the absolute minimum. And so anything before that would be very informal. I'm going to actually do a video pretty soon about what our preschool is going to look like, because we are doing preschool, but it's going to be Charlotte Mason preschool, to where it's not going to be sitting down and doing worksheets or anything like that, or crazy involved arts and crafts. It's a very natural, organic preschool. So look for that video coming out pretty soon. So last, I just want to throw in there that Charlotte Mason has been a true inspiration for me. I have learned so much about myself as a person in general, and and I have learned so much about my children. I have learned so much about education and what it should look like, what it can look like. It doesn't have to look like that. You don't have to do Charlotte Mason. There have been many children who have been schooled the traditional way and have done just fine. And so many who have thrived in that. Charlotte Mason isn't for everybody, just like there are numerous ways to homeschool a child. And you know, I would never want to do unit studies, and I would probably not actually be comfortable doing unschooling either. So there's not one way to school. There is not one right way to school your children. It's really important to take into account who you are as a person, the kind of teacher that you are, who your children are, and what your family is as a unit, and just the atmosphere that you want to have in your home, what you want your school to look like, and what you want the education to feel like. If you want to do bookwork and worksheets, and you want to have, you know, the testing, and you want to do all of that, that's fine. If you're happy with it and you feel like this is best for your children, more power to you. This is what's worked for our family. We are very happy with it. I really do feel like it has brought new life into our homeschool, and I hope that at least this has given you some more information to understand what Charlotte Mason is and what it means to be a Charlotte Mason homeschool. So if you are new here, I hope that you will consider subscribing. I put out videos weekly. That is my goal. I am a very new channel. So my goal is to do weekly videos all about homeschooling, homemaking, biblical womanhood, all of the things that just speak to my heart. So I hope that y'all have a fantastic day, and I will see y'all in my next video. Bye, guys.